Many of you will be mostly relieved that you're not going to be spoken to by someone with a tie today. So, as one of the partners at Russell McVeigh, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Pamela to the conference today. Pamela is, like me, a lawyer by training with an impressive array of qualifications from universities throughout the United States and is licensed to practice law in Michigan and Illinois. As an attorney at Empowered Law, she focuses her legal practice on issues involving Bitcoin and digital currencies, teaching others how to use Bitcoin and blockchain technology to reduce risk and uncertainty in business and legal settings. Pamela is also a respected authority on multi-signature governance and legal innovation using digital currencies. As founder and CEO of Third Key Solutions, Pamela provides operational consulting, audit preparation and recovery services to companies working with digital currencies. Pamela is clearly the right person to be with us today to help lawyers understand Bitcoin, blockchain and smart contracts, which I'm also relieved to hear she doesn't believe will replace us. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Pamela.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning. Oh, you guys got to wake up. Hi, good morning. How are you? You all right? Okay, good. So we've had two amazing presentations so far. Oh, we're way ahead, huh? Hold on one second. Let me get these slides in order. Shh, don't look. Close your eyes. Okay. All right. Let's start over. As Paul so kindly mentioned, I am Pamela Morgan. I am an attorney. I'm an educator. I'm an entrepreneur. And I've been working exclusively in Bitcoin and digital currencies since early 2014. While this presentation is kind of made for lawyers, you don't have to be a lawyer to get value out of it. So I hope that all of you will learn something and enjoy it. I like to start out by understanding who's in the audience. So this is going to be kind of a participation thing. I hope you're ready. If not, coffee's over there. You can go grab some, come back. I'd like to know, how many lawyers do we have in the room? If you could raise your hand, please. Fantastic. And how many paralegals or legal assistants, other people that work in the law? Okay. And how many just really like Law and Order and CSI and are armchair lawyers? Okay, good. We've got a nice group here. And how many of you own Bitcoin? Oh, wow, a nice portion of you. Fantastic. I would say probably 3/4 of the audience. And how many of you own Ether? A bit less, but almost the same. Great. And how about other digital currencies? I'm just going to lump them all in other. Very good. Okay. And how many of you consider yourselves investors in this technology? Okay, great. And how many of you are entrepreneurs? Designers? Artists? Musicians? Oh, very good. Look around. We need these people, friends. Have you used wallets recently? It's a bad scene. We need these people. And finally, how many students? Excellent. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. All right. So I'm going to talk a lot about Bitcoin because I love Bitcoin. I think it's amazing. And most importantly, I think people are confused when they hear about Bitcoin. They think Bitcoin is just a currency. But actually, Bitcoin is an invention. How many of you have read the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper? Oh, good, a nice portion of you. If you have not, the link is available here. Oh, and by the way, don't worry about taking notes. I'm happy to send you this presentation. You don't need to take screenshots and try to remember everything. I do recommend, if you haven't taken a look at the white paper, that you do so. Even if you're not a computer scientist, it's digestible. It's only about 9 pages long, and it will really give you an understanding of what this whole blockchain world started with. As we talk today, I'd like for you to keep in the back of your mind this question. Have third parties become unnecessary? Many of us as lawyers work as trusted third parties. We work as escrow agents. We work as people who hold property for other people. The question is, does this technology make third parties unnecessary? By the way, it's not for me to answer. It's for you. Bitcoin is the internet of money. That's the easiest way to describe it, I think. If you think about the internet, who owns and controls the internet? No one In the same way, who owns and controls Bitcoin? No one. Bitcoin, as it sits today, is a way for two people to exchange digital cash online without a third-party intermediary. Easy peasy, right? It is controlled by everyone and no one. And what I mean by that is everyone who participates in the network has a say in how it goes. Everyone runs the software freely. There's no requirement to run the software. There's no requirement to participate in the Bitcoin network. And so you have a choice whether you want to participate or whether you don't. And it's open to everyone. There are no gatekeepers. And this is a really important point. How many of you use Facebook? Ah, many. Okay. And how long did it take for them to add a dislike button? Right? A really long time. How long did we want one? A really long time. So when you have a centralized company and you have ideas and innovation, you have to ask them to pretty please add a feature that you might want. And do they do it immediately? No, never, because it has to make market sense for them to do it, right? With Bitcoin, it's different. With Bitcoin and these other digital technologies, you can actually innovate on the edges. So you can make an application that works just for you, that solves a problem just for you. You can have a market size of 2. So how does it work? I'm not going to go through all of the ins and outs of how the actual network works. What I do want you to know is, again, everyone in the network plays a part. But there are 2 constituencies that do other things. So everyone is a user in the network, but there are some who do development. And those developers are developing open source code. It's important to know that Bitcoin is not a company, so no one is paid directly by the Bitcoin company to write Bitcoin code. Some companies employ core developers, what we call them, or any developers, but that's really just a fraction of the number of people who contribute to this code. People contribute to this code because they care about it. And the open source nature allows anyone to contribute and anyone to read the code. After the developers develop the code, miners run that code, and they choose which code base to run. So again, there's no forced software update necessarily. Hard forks accepted. There's no forced updates, but miners get to choose. And we were talking a little bit, someone asked a question about immutability earlier, yeah? Proof of work is the algorithm by which miners settle transactions. And this is where we get the immutability on the Bitcoin ledger. Yes, it takes up a lot of energy. But this is important. The energy consumption is important because that's part of what provides the immutability. So at its core, a blockchain is simply a data store. It's just simply chunks of data that are linked together with a fingerprint. What is a fingerprint? All it is a hash of the data. So you take data, like what's on this page, right? And you could put it into a program, and it would create a hash that says, this hash is the combination of the data that's on this page. Does that make sense? And then later on, you could verify that this page has not been changed by that cryptographic hash. If you changed the page at all, the hash would change. Make sense? So what we do is we put together piles of data, and then we hash them. And then that says, okay, this is what's in this data, and we link it to the next block, thereby creating a blockchain. So it's simply blocks of data chained together. What if I want to change something in block 0? Can I do that? I don't know. The question is, what are the mechanisms by which you can change something in block 0? And this is different for different blockchain systems. Okay? So the question you have to ask yourself is, what does it take to change a transaction? How much work is needed? Whose approval is needed? How do we change the rules in order to change something in block 0? With Bitcoin, in order to change something in block 0, you would have to go back, recalculate block 0 with your new data, take that hash, create block 1, then create block 2, then create block 3. But guess what? While you're doing that, the network is continuing to make more blocks, block 4, block 5, block 6, block 7. And so with the proof of work algorithm, you have to compete with the entirety of the network in order to rewrite the data. I could talk about this subject for like the next hour, but you're here for a legal talk, so I won't. I encourage you to look at additional work about immutability and scalability. I think it's fascinating, and if you want to chat over lunch, I'm happy to do that. We can nerd out together. So what makes Bitcoin's blockchain trustworthy? There are a number of characteristics that make Bitcoin's blockchain trustworthy. First and foremost is the decentralization. So this means that not one company or organization controls the network. Also, it's open source, which means anyone can see the code and anyone can contribute to the code. It also means that there's lots of eyes looking for bugs. It doesn't mean it's bug-free. It just means there's more eyes looking. It's independent. So again, anyone can run the code anytime, anywhere. You get to choose what code you run. It's open to everyone. Again, this is an important point. I know that some of you probably feel a little queasy when I say that because you're used to traditional systems where we get security by exclusion. In these sorts of networks, open to everyone is a good thing. It's where the innovation comes from. With Bitcoin, we have proof of work, which again is proof of work is where the miners compete to solve a problem, and that problem then becomes proof of their work, their solution. It's kind of like bingo. You guys all know bingo, right? So if you're trying to mine a block, you're looking for a solution. And as soon as you have the solution, you yell out to the network, bingo! And you have to prove that you got all of the squares, right? Same thing with mining. So you have to prove to the network that you got the solution to the problem. It's uncensorable. What do I mean by that? Uncensorable, unstoppable. What that actually means is that if I construct a Bitcoin transaction and it's valid by the consensus rules and everything is good, and I transmit that transaction to the network, nobody can stop it. Nobody can pull it back. No one can do anything to prevent that transaction from executing. Does that sound scary? Yeah, a little bit. You're like, what if I make a mistake? You double check, right? It's like when you cut wood, measure twice, cut once. It's the same sort of thing, right? And there are also other mechanisms that we can put into place for consumer protection, and I'm actually going to talk about that in just a few minutes. This is public, meaning that all of the transactions on the Bitcoin network are public. Everyone can see them. This is also a scary proposition for some. But the nice thing about this is that it's fully auditable. So sometimes you hear that people use Bitcoin for nefarious purposes, right? That's really dumb. And here's why. Because all of the transactions are fully public, which means that this is an evidence trail that never goes away. If law enforcement can tie a key to you, to your identity, the evidence just sits there forevermore. So it's a really dumb way for people to use this currency. It's a bad idea. It's borderless. And for those of you who are lawyers in the room, you're already feeling super uncomfortable because borderless is crazy for us, right? Because our laws are based on jurisdiction. They're based upon borders and rules within a certain area and space. This technology transcends borders. It doesn't shun them. It simply doesn't know they exist. It's just data running across network lines. Within the protocol, it doesn't realize that it's going across national borders. It doesn't realize that you're not allowed to accept this money from point A to point B pursuant to a local law. And those characteristics together are what make Bitcoin's blockchain immutable and therefore trustworthy. So, what happens when we start to have some of these things disappear? We get into the hype danger. So how many of you are familiar with a DLT, distributed ledger technology? Okay, good. And other sorts of blockchains, permissioned systems and things like this? Yeah, they're all the rage. People are super excited. And I see a lot of this, when people get excited about a new technology, they often try to wrap their heads around it and go, oh, this is awesome. How can I apply it to what I'm already doing? And so they try to make this new technology fit in the box of what already exists for them. And so we're seeing a lot of projects that look like that they say, oh, it's new and different and it's got blockchain, but really it's just a bank. Really, it's just a clearinghouse. Really, it's just the same thing plus blockchain technology. And so I want to give you some tools to how you can tell the hype from what's really, really innovative. And I encourage you to start with the characteristics of Bitcoin's blockchain. For those of us that are lawyers, these characteristics are very uncomfortable for our clients. Our clients are used to making money based upon the antithesis of mostly all of these things, okay? So as a lawyer, I really encourage you to look closely at these characteristics and help your clients understand the risks as they start to take away these characteristics. So the first thing you hear is, yeah, I mean, I really like that blockchain thing, but we like centralized models. It's how we stay in control. So we're just gonna, how about we just distribute it amongst our 5 main offices? Is that okay? I mean, it's still a blockchain, right? It's still a blockchain. It's fine. And we'd like to control what version of software that these nodes are running. We'd like to make sure, because that way we can get consistency. So away, that goes away too. And then, open source, you can't make money on open source. So how about we take the open source software that's out there, we'll fork it, and then make our own private version of it, okay? Let's do that. And then, how about we don't want it to be open to everyone? I mean, everyone. Teenagers in the Ukraine, no way. No, we can't let them access our network. We have to close it off. Can't have this thing open. That's crazy talk. And proof of work, that energy consumption. We don't need all that pesky energy. We should just have signing like we usually do, like a contract. Everybody will sign, it's gonna be fine, don't worry about it. And uncensorable, we're not doing anything that's gonna be censored anyway. I mean, it's our private blockchain, so we don't need uncensorable. And then, we'd like it to be immutable, but it doesn't really have those characteristics anymore. And we definitely don't want public transactions. We don't want everyone to see every single transaction. I mean, what about our competitors? They'll have a competitive advantage against us if they see what we're doing. So, and borderless, I mean, we have to comply with regulation in every jurisdiction that we participate in. And so, as you can see, all of a sudden, all of these characteristics disappear. And what do you have left? I don't know, but it's not a secure blockchain like Bitcoin, I can tell you that, because it doesn't have the same characteristics. So when you're looking at these technologies, I encourage you to look at these characteristics and ask yourselves, does this blockchain that I am looking at share those same characteristics? If it does not, that means that it is not immutable. You can tell I'm passionate about this. So we're going to move on to another blockchain that shares those same characteristics, and that's Ethereum. So how many of you know what the 3rd of January 2009 is? Anyone? 3rd of January 2009. Absolutely, it's the launch of Bitcoin. It was the Genesis block, as we call it, the Genesis block. It was the first block in what we now understand as blockchain technology. And so Bitcoin has been running since January 3rd, 2009, nonstop. Ethereum was launched on a pre-sale in August of 2014. Why am I telling you this? Because you guys, this technology is in its infancy. We're talking about babies. We're talking about technologies that aren't even in double digits yet. We're not even 10 years in. Okay, so we're talking about very, very early technologies. And so as we look at these, at all of these projects that are out there, and there's some that are really awesome and have the ability, I think, to change the world, just remember that there's going to be lots of mistakes along the way, right? We're dealing with brand new technology. Here's a problem for lawyers, and Paul alluded to it earlier. The issue with the term smart contract. So a smart contract in Ethereum language is simply a computer program. And I'm going to show you how you all can write a smart contract today. Are you ready? You're like, I don't know. Don't worry, it's real easy. You're just going to click one button. So in Ethereum language, a smart contract is simply an Ethereum program. That's it. It's a computer program. It is not a contract by way of lawyer contract. Although in theory, if you had a smart contract that executed and you had offer acceptance, consideration, et cetera, and 2 parties, you could in theory, create a contract by way of that. If you haven't read Nick Szabo's paper about smart contracts, I recommend that you do. If you don't know him, he's the one that coined the term. As you'll see, it was in 1996-ish. And we consider him the father of smart contracts. But basically, he was one of the first people to write anything about having computer code execute legal contracts. So if you go to ethereum.org, which I think that many of you probably already have, the first thing you'll see when you scroll down is you need to download a wallet. And so how many of you have a wallet already? Fantastic. And for those of you that don't, again, in the corner, the volunteers will help you download a wallet, and they'll give you some ETH today if you'd like to do that. For any of you that are coming to my workshop on Wednesday, you should definitely do that because we're going to do some hands-on transactions on Wednesday. But for today, you can go over there, download a wallet, and get some ETH and play with this. The second thing on their website is create your own token. So you could very easily and quickly create your own token. Maybe you'll do it later this week. Who knows? And all you do is click the button, and it says issue your token, and this is what pops up. This is a snippet of an actual smart contract. This is what it looks like. I'm here to tell you that this technology is going to affect every practice area for lawyers. All of these and more. There are projects in all of these areas and more. So the question I get asked most often is, will smart contracts replace lawyers? And they have this glimmer in their eye when they ask me this. They're very excited. And I will tell you, interestingly, in the US, pre-election, people were like, I would have to, when I would introduce myself and say I'm a lawyer, I would have to say things like, don't judge me, right? Because lawyers were not held in the highest esteem. And then post-election in the US, when lawyers started working with people and protecting civil rights and doing all these sorts of things, now we're like gods. They're like, oh, you're a lawyer, fantastic. It's amazing how perception changes. But often when people say, can we get rid of lawyers, it's because they view lawyers as an impediment, as a roadblock, as something that prevents them from doing what they want to do. And so they're very excited about smart contracts replacing lawyers. And my answer is always the same. Smart contracts will not replace lawyers. Smart contracts will replace lazy lawyers. And I don't mean that as a shun. What I mean by that is, if what you're doing in your practice is simply form fills, if you're just filling in forms for people, if you're acting as an escrow agent, if you've built your practice around being a trusted third party, your career is in jeopardy. These technologies are going to fill the role of trusted third parties in many, many instances. Why? Because they're better. So we need to ask ourselves, what value are we actually providing as lawyers? Just like we ask our startup clients, what value are you providing? What problem are you solving? I had a discussion last night with someone at Drinks about whether or not lawyers will be replaced by AI and whether lawyers will be actually just doing legal research. And my answer is, I don't think either. I think the role of lawyers will change fundamentally. I think lawyers will be giving strategic advice, risk management advice. Those sorts of skills don't go away. If you've got a great lawyer, what they're doing is helping you understand what risks you have ahead of you and how to properly evaluate those risks and how to make changes, subtle changes, to reduce those risks. That's not something that a blockchain or smart contracts can replace. Again, I think that this is going to affect every area of the practice of law. It would be impossible in our time allotted for me to go through all of these areas, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to touch on a couple of them that I think are really interesting. This technology is allowing us to rethink how we organize people and projects. So I want you to imagine more than just a corporation, more than just an LLC. How many of you have heard of the DAO? Quite a few of you. Okay. DAO is an acronym, and it stands for lots of different things. In this context, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Some people also call it a democratic autonomous organization. DCO is a distributed or decentralized collaborative organization. And the reason that I have these two things up is so that you can distinguish between the existence of people. So autonomy is autonomous. Think machine to machine, think people are not involved. Collaborative is people are involved. People are collaborating together and they're doing things in a different way. And how many of you have heard of ICO? ICO? Okay. How about IPO, initial public offering? Great. So most of you have heard of an initial public offering. What that is simply an issuance of stock, right? An issuance of equity in a company. So remember how I showed you earlier, you can create your own token, and that's the second project on the Ethereum website? Yeah, so people are now taking those tokens and they're creating ICOs, which are initial coin offerings. So they're selling these. They're selling them arguably as equity sometimes. It depends on your jurisdiction and it depends on what the rules are of equity wherever you're selling this. Many of them look suspiciously like securities with very little backing them. So if you're interested in ICOs, I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm saying look at them with a careful, close eye. Be very careful. This is what's happening. There's a ton of ICOs that are happening out there right now. Be careful out there, friends. Secondly, the second way that this is going to affect us globally is public accountability. So remember how we talked about the transparency and everyone sees all transactions on the Bitcoin network? What can we do with that? Well, we can make governments and charities and all sorts of other organizations accountable to us as individuals. This is GiveTrack. GiveTrack is a project by the BitGive Foundation. They are a 501c3 recognized nonprofit in the United States. Full disclosure, I'm an advisor for them. And they are creating a donation transparency project whereby they're working with the Water Project in Kenya, and I believe they're also working with BitPesa to create a fully transparent line from donating to BitGive all the way down to giving to buying the bricks that go into the well in Kenya. What is the problem they're solving? The problem they're solving is often when donations go across borders, they disappear. They just go away, right? We give $1 million, and what ends up in the hands of the people who actually need it? 100,000. It's crazy what's happening out there. So this is a way that we can use this technology and the full donation transparency platform to track those donations all the way down. Is it perfect? No. Can you actually prove that that brick went into that well? Not yet. But it's a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. How do I use this tech in my practice? I get paid in Bitcoin. I get paid in Ether. I actually work with this technology every day and have been doing so for more than 3 years. I focus on estate planning and ADR and key management and security and do all sorts of things. I expand my practice area when there's a need, when there's something that one of my clients needs and you know they can't really get it anywhere else. I go, oh, okay, let's figure that out, like most entrepreneurs do. So I am one of the experts in multi-signature technology. And what I love about multi-sig is that from a lawyer's point of view, is this allows us to enforce policy with the technology. So a lot of times we'll have policies within companies that say things like, oh, we need 2 signatures. We need 2 people to sign off on that before you can spend the money, right? But how do you actually enforce that? You enforce it through internal policies, and a lot of times those have breakdown. We can use this technology to enforce those policies directly. So how many of you have ever used an escrow agent? Hands? Okay, great. And how many of you can't wait to use one again? Crickets, okay. So the problem with using an escrow agent is that they're this third party that's in the middle, and we have to use them because the 2 parties don't trust each other, right? If we have a buyer and a seller, if you're the buyer, you have to prove that you have the money in order to purchase, right? But you're not going to give it to the seller because what are they going to do? Steal it. They're going to run away with it. You don't trust them to hold it for you and follow through with their end of the deal. So in the world outside of this technology, you have to get a trusted third party. And typically that person is either a banker or a lawyer, someone who has a fiduciary duty to not run away and steal. So you give them your money, and then what happens? They're inevitably the third wheel, friends. You can't do a deal without them. You have to do the deal when the escrow agent is available, at their office often, right? You have to do it Monday through Friday. You have to do it on their time frame, and they inevitably become a party to the deal. With multi-sig, we can create, in 5 minutes, we can create something called a multi-signature address with 3 parties on our cell phones. And then we can transfer money into this address. And by way of the technology itself, by way of creating the multi-signature address, anything that's in that address must have 2 signatures in order to go out. This is enforced by the consensus rules of the network, not by an internal policy. So let me explain how this plays out. If I'm the escrow agent here, I can't run away with the money. Why? Because I need another signature, right? Either the buyer or the seller would have to collude with me in order to have me run away with the money, which is a superior position to just having the escrow agent have the money, right? But here's the magic. If the buyer and seller agree, they don't need me. They can do a deal on a Sunday night at midnight. They don't need me anymore. You can also use this in governance and for audits. So one of the things I do is I help startups that are using Bitcoin create policy controls within their companies so that they can better handle their corporate governance issues, right? So we create project addresses, we create capital accounts, we create operations accounts, all of these sorts of things. This is one example of a capital account. The interesting thing about it here, as you'll notice, is this is a 3 of 5. What that means is that 3 signatures out of 5 are needed in order to release funds. You'll notice that I have 2 keys for investors. And this is really cool. This is cool because if you are an investor, you can watch everything that's happening on the capital account. You don't have to ask management for an update on what's happening. You know what's happening. You're a signer on the address. If something happens to the CEO or the CTO, the investors can come in and get that money and move it to another address. It's a very powerful tool. We can also use it for dispute resolution. This is another one of my projects. Some of you might have heard of the DAM project. Yeah, you have to say it like that. It's the Decentralized Arbitration and Mediation Network. And it's a project that's based upon bringing arbitration to our industry. So you can use multi-signature to introduce a third party if you want to do that. And you would do that by way of a multi-sig. For those of you who own Bitcoin and ETH, you don't need to raise your hands. I just want you to think about this for a second. If something happened to you today, could your family inherit it? Probably not. So I am one of the only attorneys that work in estate planning. And I help people, I along with my business partner in Third Key Solutions, we help people create estate planning documents. Now you have to have the legal side and the tech side. One side without the other will not work. You must have legal and tech in this. So I also work with lawyers, estate planning lawyers, and help them understand the tech and help them build plans for their clients. This is an example of something called multi-factor multi-sig. You'll notice that here I have listed a Trezor, which is a hardware wallet, a Ledger, which is a hardware wallet, and a laptop. These aren't people. These are 3 different devices. So you can actually have the same person have all 3 keys. They can maintain full and complete control, but they can also have the benefit of multi-sig, meaning if one of their keys gets lost or stolen, they don't lose their money. Proof of existence is another interesting use for this technology. As I said before, you can hash a document. And so one of the ways that I use this in my practice is I'll hash contracts when they're finally finished. And I'll use this tool called proof of existence. And I'll hash the document, a PDF version of a signed contract. And I'll put it in the Bitcoin blockchain. That hash will live in the Bitcoin blockchain. Then years later, I can take this PDF and I can say, Your Honor, this is the same document that I had back then, and I can prove it. through a cryptographic hash. They, the judge, can hash it themselves using software and prove it to themselves that this is the same document that I had 2 years ago. So what do you need to know about serving clients in this area? Well, a lot and not that much. The good news is that really no one knows what the laws are relating to these new technologies. It's a really interesting area to practice in. You do, however, need to develop basic competence in cryptographic keys. What do I mean by that? I mean, you need to understand at a basic level what a cryptographic key pair is, how to back up keys, and how to use them securely. This is critical for you to understand because you can't adequately help your clients assess risk if you don't understand how they're holding and using keys. Next, you need to understand that this is more than just accepting and transmitting money, and I think most of you do. There are tax issues and jurisdictional issues and data storage and privacy issues and the balance between patents and open source. There's a really great movement in this industry to use patents and then commit them to a defensive patent pool. Those of us that are interested in the open source community really have a problem, and if you meet a lot of developers, you'll see that they have a big problem with patents, right? Because it's really antithetical to open source. The problem with not patenting these ideas is that there are companies around the world that are attempting to patent this technology. And so there's a balance there to be had between patenting and then committing those patents to the community and giving people an open license to use that. If you want more information about it, I'm happy to share it with you. And then finally, estate planning. You need to become comfortable with uncertainty, which I know as lawyers, we are risk adverse. We are a risk adverse group. We like to have certainty. And this is one of the reasons why lawyers are not using smart contracts in any meaningful way in their practice today. Because as I said, this technology is so new that it's not something that we can actually rely on from a legal perspective yet. If you're interested in public policy work, there's a ton of opportunities here for you. And if you're interested in shaping the law and creating the law, there are a ton of opportunities. If you're serving clients in this space, please be careful. There's expanding scope. And what do I mean by that? This technology is so versatile that you may have a client who comes to you and says, hey, listen, I've got this gaming operation that I want to do. And you go through and you work it out with them and you help them assess their risk and all of these things are good. And then all of a sudden, you see an email that says, oh, they're doing an ICO or they're going to crowdfund. And they don't recognize that that presents serious legal issues, right? Things that you should be involved with. So if you're helping startups in this space, I really recommend that you keep in touch with them on a regular basis and kind of ask them, hey, so are you pivoting? Anything new going on? Because they will be tempted to do these things and not realize that they're opening themselves up to a whole bunch of legal issues, not because they don't want to talk to you about it, they just don't realize that there are issues involved. So I encourage you to really keep in touch with them. There are a ton of resources, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's a ton of resources available to you. If you're interested in how the law is developing in the US, I recommend you take a look at Coin Center. Also, Common Accord is a really interesting project. It's commonaccord.org, and they're aiming to bridge the gap between legal language as far as traditional contracts and code so that developers can just pull a library in and those libraries will reference actual legal documents. If you're interested in that, please take a look. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin and how this actually works under the hood, I recommend there's a free MOOC, which is a massively open online course. I've taken the course twice just because I missed some classes in between. It's free, it's really accessible, and I highly recommend it if you really want to learn more about these technologies. I have information on my website about estate planning, and I'm happy to talk with any of you about it. This is a free DIY estate planning guide, so feel free to take a look at it, use it. All of my stuff is open source. Okay, and finally, I really encourage you to get involved. If you're interested at all in this, like, you've taken a huge first step by being here today, and I applaud you for doing that. There are 2 meetup groups, and if you're not familiar with meetup.com, it is an awesome resource, especially when you travel, and not just for Bitcoin nerd stuff, also for lots of other things. But meetup.com is a place where people use this website, and they come together, and they meet people who have shared and like interests. So you have an Auckland Bitcoin meetup group, and then you've got Blockchain Auckland. I highly recommend that you join these groups and start to participate and meet people here locally who can help you on your journey. Finally, I'm giving a workshop on Wednesday. If you'd like more information, you can feel free to have a chat with me. I hope that this presentation has brought you value. And for those of you who are interested in practicing in this space, it is so new. It is a great place to develop a niche practice. It is a great place for you to start today and become an expert over the next couple of years. And this practice area is only growing. I want to thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but thank you, and I'm happy to talk with you at the coffee. All right, 5 minutes for questions. Yes, I think we have a mic. Or I can just repeat the question. Oh, yes.
You have mentioned, over here, left, to your left, you have mentioned open source and patents together. And you've made the case that there is, still a case for patents in the open source community. But isn't there something like prior art? So can't you outwit patent necessities by providing open source that makes a case for prior art and have that basically as a timestamping so people can't shut you out afterwards?
First of all, great question. I am not an expert in patent law. Let's start there. But different jurisdictions have different rules when it comes to patents. And in some jurisdictions, at least, prior art is no longer recognized, unfortunately. And so it is actually a first to file. The challenge, I think that this is such a big area, and we need a lot of help, great minds, to help develop really good pools and other alternative ways to think about this sort of stuff. The problem, as I said, is that if we don't patent these ideas, other people will. And if they're in jurisdictions where prior art is no longer recognized, we could get into a problem where we have, patent trolling and people putting other people out of business unjustly. And so I think we can do better. I have to believe we can do better than that. I don't know what better looks like yet, but if there are people in this room that are interested in exploring that, I'm happy to connect you with other people that I know that want to explore those same things. So I don't know if that was a non-answer answer, but I'm a lawyer.
Hello. Thanks for
Hi.
that. I just wondered if you could speak really briefly about positioning Bitcoin blockchain versus Ethereum for these sorts of solutions. It seems like what you've done was probably based on Ethereum. Is that right?
Good question. So what I do, what I've talked about today is applicable. I've done work with Bitcoin. Most of these solutions are also applicable in Ethereum, right? But I haven't done enough work in it to speak to you about it, right? So they're actually executed in different ways. Multi-sig is executed in a different way in Ethereum. It's by a multi-sig contract, not by multi-sig within the protocol with UTXO, et cetera. So I focus on Bitcoin. I also work in the Ethereum space, but again, the stuff that I talked with you about today is Bitcoin related. You didn't know Bitcoin could do that, did you? Yeah, really cool. And it can do so much more. You guys, there's lock time. You can actually create layered permissions and if statements. And there's so much more to Bitcoin than what people think. Not to minimize Ethereum, but yeah.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was really fascinating and definitely agree with a lot of things that you said. So I'm a lawyer by education and I'm a self-trained software engineer, which is a crazy combination. You were talking about whether smart contracts will replace lawyers and probably not. But the combination of AI, which is a threat to, I've read an article about how paralegals' jobs, for example, can definitely be automated by AI. But my question is, as a lawyer, we will have, or as lawyers, we'll have to work with a lot more like smart contracts and stuff. And I think lawyers should just evolve into software engineers, I would say, because if you are designing a smart contract for an interesting, new company or whatever that is, you have to be a software engineer to understand all those things, right? So that's how I see lawyers could evolve into, those magical creatures that can understand law and write code. Would you agree with that, or what do you think about this? The combination of smart contracts and AI and the role of lawyer in the future, in 5 years, perhaps?
So I don't foresee the future, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I think those are really interesting points that you make. And for those of you who are software engineers, how many of you would like lawyers writing code? Right, exactly. So you are one of the few people who do these sorts of things. I too code. So I'm a nerd in that way. My undergraduate degree is in computer programming and business administration. So I too kind of do these things. I don't think that all lawyers will have to understand how to code. I think all lawyers will have to understand the implications of smart contracts, and I think all lawyers will have to have a really good software developer friend. I think that as the practice of law develops, it will definitely change. And I think, as you rightly said, many jobs, particularly those who are not strategy related, are going to be automated for sure. I think, legal research is one of those areas. However, when you're doing legal research, for example, this industry is a great example. We're doing legal research in, Bitcoin and blockchain and these new trust systems. And so there's nothing in well-settled law that relates directly to what the questions that we're trying to answer, right? So for those sorts of issues, I don't know that AI, and I'm not an expert in AI, I don't know that AI can actually solve those sorts of problems, right? So when we're dealing with novel issues, when we're dealing with relating cases that don't fit squarely, but they kind of relate in these sorts of ways, I think you'll still need lawyers to make those jumps. I don't think that the technology itself and smart contracts will be able to do that. Again, I think we'll move to a more strategic role, a more risk assessment role, and we will really need to understand the implications of what this whole new automated world that we live in looks like. And lawyers, you do have to get comfortable with tech. And you're here, so you're already ready to do that. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir, right? You guys are already here, and you're already ready to do this. For lawyers that are afraid of tech and don't want to move forward, I'm hoping they're looking to retire in the next 5 years. Only because your practice is going to be impacted in a way that you'll need to either retire or adapt. Does that answer your question? Okay. Do we have time for one more, or are we done?
Yeah, let's make this the
Test.
Okay, final one, no pressure.
G'day. Thanks for your talk. Hi. In the first part of your talk, you mentioned blockchains and also distributed ledger technology.
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked at the difference, or are they the same thing, or?
Ooh, loaded question to end the session. Yes. Okay, so are distributed ledgers, are DLT, the same thing as blockchain, and are they the same thing as Bitcoin's blockchain? Not in my world. So DLT, and people, you guys, the terminology is terrible here, okay? People use blockchain and they mean everything from the Bitcoin blockchain to, a bunch of people using just a hash table. And the reason is because blockchain is like the new gluten-free, right? Everything's got blockchain. Everything's gluten-free. So, this is that's why I wanted to give you those characteristics so that it can kind of help you see, all right, well, they're saying that this blockchain or this distributed ledger is immutable, right? Tamper-proof. Really? How? If I was an attacker, how can I change what's in your blockchain? Is it possible? With Bitcoin, if you go back, say, more than a week, it is impossible. And when I say impossible, I mean there is not enough energy in the world. If you took all the energy production in the world and put it together, you would not have enough to make a change in the Bitcoin blockchain and have the rest of the network acknowledge it. It is impossible. That's what I mean when I say immutable, right? So then the question is it from a technology perspective? Is it feasible? Is it possible to change the ledger? And how could you change the ledger? If I have a DLT consortium, we were talking about this a little bit last night at drinks, but it's very popular right now for banks to say, listen, this pesky SWIFT network, we don't need them. We can get rid of this third party and we can just have a consortium. And what we're going to do is all the major banks are going to hold keys, right? Sounds nice, warm and fuzzy, yeah? Anyone see a problem with that? The problem is that the SWIFT network provides a very important function, and that is oversight. If you have the market makers also being the people who validate transactions, they have an incentive to change the ledger, right? So let's say that there's a terrible day on the market and things fell apart. What stops them from going back and colluding together to make a change? Ethics? What about the LIBOR rate? So when you start to think about how these technologies are actually going to be used, I encourage you to think about how will we actually make changes to the ledger. So to answer your question, when you're looking at DLT, some people call it DLT, especially the further they want to get away from Bitcoin, the more they'll go to DLT, right? So they go, oh, Bitcoin, oh no, we don't want that. But actually, Bitcoin is the longest running secure blockchain out there. And so I don't see why you wouldn't look to that as the guidepost, as the benchmark of what is secure and what the standards should be. It doesn't mean that that is the solution to every problem, friends. Like, that is not what I'm advocating. You don't always need a full public everything, but look at it with an eye towards BS, because a lot of it's out there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.